one thing to talk about, circling back to the original theme of this being like older and gaming maybe younger women. I asked this, and I think this is relevant for a lot of people that might be watching this because it comes up a lot is what do you say when a girl asks you how old you are, especially if she's in her like say younger 20s. And so that comes up. Fortunately, obviously being Asian, I tend to look younger than I actually am, but in case anyone watching this isn't, then I would start off with sort of like a Gen Z joke, right? It's like I'm beekeeping age, right? So are you familiar with that meme? It's
I
super,
don't get it.
super.
I'm too old.
Okay. It's on the TikToks. Like if you tell this to a Gen
Oh
Z
man.
girl, she'll get it, right? It comes from like Family Guy, and it's an entire thing about um the daughter's friend who starts looking at like I think Lois's like dad is like is he beekeeping age? And he goes in and to the point like I want to fuck your dad, right? So when you say beekeeping age, it's acknowledging that you are older, but also recognizing and framing that you are a sexual older man to what is essentially a younger girl, because only like the Gen Z girls are gonna get it. So I start off with that sort of joke, right? But I also, I'll be honest about it, but I also play into the daddy frame, right? I'll just own it. Like, yeah, like I'm older, more mature, and like, do you find, older guys attractive? And they'll almost always like universally say yes. So there's this both, instead of just answering that question factually, you can make it light of it, sexually frame it, and just own it. And such that way you can sort of tap into her um, fantasy, if you will, when it comes to older men.
What do you think is the future of dating? There are things like OnlyFans, and I wouldn't have imagined that on things like Tinder, you would have to filter for the craziest things that you wouldn't have imagined back in the 90s. Like, is this woman a man? Like that would just never occur to you back in the 90s or the 2000s. But now it's this thing, especially, and I mentioned this on the debate this week between Mike Pickup Alpha and Mr. Lucario. There was a guy in when I was in London, just new there. There was a guy who used to live in Bangkok in Thailand, and he said, "Want to play a game of Thai roulette?" And he would open up his Tinder and say, "You have to guess whether each person on here is a woman or a lady boy." And it was so 50-50. It was ridiculous. He used like the passport feature to place himself in Bangkok again. And we were guessing and like, God damn, it's so hard to tell, especially if you're not experienced with this. Uh, it's just completely crazy. And these kinds of things we didn't have to worry about before. But now, even in Lima, it's obvious, but when you are like going shopping and suddenly you're shopping with your daughter, like I was in one of those Japanese stores like Miniso, and it's all women in there. I'm the only man. And then said, oh, wait, there was another man, but dressed, disguised as a woman. These are things that were not on our mind years ago, but now there are things like OnlyFans, Instagram. There are women who are fishing for attention, or in the background, they say um, they're suddenly in Dubai, but they're not in Dubai with their female friends, and they're only taking photos of themselves at the beach. So, who are they with? Is she traveling all the way to Dubai with herself? Is she going with her mother, maybe? I don't know what's going on. Seems pretty suspicious. What do you think about the future of dating, the kinds of good things and dangerous things, unexpected things? What's going to happen?
Well, I mean, pulling out the old crystal ball, you see that obviously online dating has accelerated, especially after COVID, but also there's sort of a slight swing on the pendulum against. I think at this point, though, dating apps are going to be a permanent fixture of dating in general. As I mentioned, like really early on in this panel, is Gen Z just seemingly lacking the kind of emotional resilience that the previous generation of men didn't have, to the point where they are actively fearful of women, right? Beyond just, oh, I don't want to appear like creepy or anything like that. It's like it's almost feels like sometimes talking with the younger Gen Z men, like act of fear. Like they're actively afraid of women, not just if they do something wrong, but like they are scared of women. So what's in the future? Technology, probably more technology, right? AI is a big thing. I know a lot of people do like AI photos. I imagine at some point, just so that they try to retain some sort of user base, they either have it starts to include like a pay to win option of like, hey, we'll use AI to enhance your photos. Or the other extreme is like, we're gonna have some sort of algorithm that, bans you or acknowledges that you are using AI photos. Because at this point, unless you already know how to take really good photos, and there's a science art to it, right? You should be able to take good photos without the use of AI. But that is something I definitely foresee. Like, how are people going to introduce AI into dating? Like, you already see people doing it on some scale. Um, then, or the young boys, the young men going to be able to sort of step up in this generation, or are they going to increase the lonely male single epidemic, right? What's the statistic? Like 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5, Gen Z guys are going to remain virgins for the rest of their life, right? I mean, you sort of see some of this in some of the Asian countries like Korea, Japan, where their fertility rate is like the lowest in the world, where at a certain point their entire population is going to collapse because they aren't hooking up enough. Is that potentially going to happen to America if certain, I guess, dating traditions, don't happen where guys are more proactive? I guess it's we're all looking at a
I
crystal ball.
saw an article this week probably where it said the Japanese are going extinct. I was like, that's a bit extreme. I don't think it's gonna be like that. Like every Japanese person will cease to exist in the next 100 years. That's a
Yeah,
bit
I mean, all
extreme.
those
But
articles
it's
and
like, yeah, but
yeah, I mean, all those articles in Korea about the low fertility rate. I mean, it is true, but they're talking more about like the economic collapse, right? Like if you don't have a new generation of young workers, like the infrastructure, the economy, the late workforce, the labor isn't going to be there because everybody is in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. And, some of this stuff requires young young backs to be able to do the backbreaking labor. I think that's what it really refers to.
It's crazy to think about though, but inevitably there are going to be cycles. History repeats itself, I guess. But yeah, I'm not sure what else. It seems kind of crazy to think about.
But I guess I'll give you a story. Like this just happened like last week on my client who had been referred to by a female friend. She had heard of us, had high opinion of us, and told her friend who was a 43-year-old virgin, um, 5'3" Asian guy, right? And he just had this very sort of, I mean, I'm not a big proponent in the entire alpha beta, thing. That's a very Western
Hmm.
concept. That's kind of based on debunked science. But there is some
Yeah.
sort of truth to it, right? Where it was a very submissive attitude where he had the expectation of women checking him out. Like he literally stomped his feet and like said to me and whined and his voice goes up like, "Why aren't girls looking at me? Why aren't girls coming over talking to me?" Right? And that's even though he's 43, like I hear that a lot from Gen Z guys, right? It's like, why aren't women making the effort to come and talk to them, look at them? And I'm like, bro, like you've got to take action in order for that to happen. And he eventually did. Like he introduced himself to these couple girls, didn't go anywhere, but it's friendly. And then when I pushed him to go into like this four set of girls, including like two hot blondes, and he was able to get them to open and brought them back to where our entire group was sitting. Sat them down, and he was like sitting in between the two blondes, and all of a sudden the previous girls he had approached then approached him, right? And so he was able to see the tangible attraction being created by taking action, having these social cues. And, by doing that, he experienced what it's like to have girls look at him, to have girls approach him. Because again, he a guy that had like really high anxiety, but also just weirdly expected women to look at him, women to approach him. Right. And he's 5'3", small little Asian dude. I mean, he's okay looking, maybe like a 6 out of 10. Kind of cute, but again, short. And having this expectation, it's like, no, man, like girls are never gonna check you out. Like you have to make it happen. And by taking action, he was able to get girls to notice him. And so for any of the guys that are watching this, if they're young or if they're old, it's still not too late to take action. It's like you are not obligated to be the you of 5, 10, 15 years ago. You can make a choice to be a newer, better version of you.
Hmm. Completely agree. I got an Asian question. And this is based on some observations over quite a while now. Do you feel that black pill is kind of prominent in guys who are Asian more so than other ethnicities?
Hmm. I mean, there is definitely an attractive allure in like black, red pill, a certain sort of nihilism, right? I don't know how more demographically attractive it is compared to your white or African American participants. I will say the typical manosphere of red pill, all that, there is definitely like a racist undercurrent to it because they're always talking about like, especially red pills, like, oh, men, we can go back to the days of men were men and women were women, except back in those days, there was a definitive racial hierarchy, right?
Hmm.
In the 1920s, 30s, where it was literally illegal for me to marry a white woman. It's like in the law that I couldn't, right? Um, and so while I can see how when you're Asian American and you're faced with the sexualized racism as well as the normal dating difficulty, they might be drawn to those type of pilled communities. I don't know if I see it as, out representative compared to like white guys or whatnot. But I definitely don't encourage, that to happen because it is self-destructive. And like I said, it is, because it still places Asians at the bottom, like regardless. So,
My observation is for Asian guys and white guys, they seem to be more likely to look towards black pill ideology. And then for because I'm deep here in the South in Peru, for if you want to call it Hispanics or Latinos, it's more so about game and being social, especially if you're out of the United States, for example, because USA Chicanos, Mexicans are different to Mexicans, and Mexicans are different to Peruvians. Here, down deep in the South of Native America, things are way more social and in the sense that people are actually going outside and socializing compared to in Gringo land in the white countries like Australia, USA, Canada, and so on. It's a lot more enclosed and people's or placing too much emphasis or too little emphasis or it's hard to place the right amount of emphasis on the importance of dating apps because then that has the bias of you have to be good looking to use dating apps because that's how you're judged when you put yourself on a screen. You can't really put your personality on a screen unless it's in a video. And then if you do, you kind of have to be a content creator in order to do that. So there's the bias of the medium there. But yeah, I guess there isn't much else to be said on that one.
yeah,
So
but also
let's
like each community um will have some sort of oral tradition when it comes to dating, right? You typically see this in like African American community, where you don't see as many black guys at least in my experience, that get into pickup simply because like spitting game is more encouraged in like the African American community. Probably also
Mhm.
same is true like the Latino community, you know, the machismo, if you will, just being more social. You see this, I think, a lot more in the sort of like Protestant white culture or like Asian culture. At least, you know, you can probably speak more on like the Caucasian side, but at least an Asian American coming over to America, like what could my stepfather, who had, you know, been thrown into like a Vietnamese communist re-education camp, moving over to America, what could he have taught me of how to date in America? Like absolutely nothing. So, like, how do I learn, right? How do I learn the normal dating traditions that everyone else was taught? So, I know in our Asian American community, that's definitely why a lot of us will tend to gravitate to more, call it non-traditional sort of like dating education simply because it doesn't exist for us, or they just stick with Asian girls, right?
Yeah, my mother-in-law's father was a machismo. He's in his 80s now, just like Eric Weber, so that could be interesting. But yeah, that's pretty funny. How can a man in his 40s or 50s regain confidence after getting divorced or when lo a long-term relationship ends?
Like I've had a lot of students who went through a divorce, and obviously something like that, you know, and it is not only like it's the death of a relationship, right? It's that loss and you know that affects you emotionally, mentally, and probably even financially, right? So getting over that, obviously you have to grieve for it, but the biggest thing is you have to you're essentially going through like a dopamine like a drug withdrawal, right? Whatever sort of like dopamine that you used to get in that loving relationship at forever long it lasted. Now you're out on your own and you're not getting your fix of that. So you have to go through a withdrawal. You have to go like essentially like cold turkey. And then when you're ready to eventually start getting out there, create a dating funnel, right? Where whether that's dating apps, cold approach, nighttime, daytime, social circle, hobbies, um, where that women can meet you and that you're not dependent upon having that one person in your life form the basis of your core identity because you essentially have to create a new identity, right? Because previously it was like the two of you, now it's you again. And you have to essentially be willing to reinvent yourself. And that takes time, that takes a process. Uh, but it is, you know, an old adage, you got to get out, back out there, you know, gotta get back on the horse. That's the only way it works.
Yeah. So you've been in this, perhaps also business-wise for 20 years at least, and you come across as one of the way more professional guys, especially when I'm dealing with you in this industry. You're way more professional than a lot of the guys that I tend to deal with in so many ways. What has kept you going in having this as your not only lifestyle in dating, but as your business as well? How have you managed to keep your business and your dating lifestyle going for so long?
That's a great question, but also like a very fully, you know, a full answer to that because it takes so many different aspects, right?
Mm.
Because I started back in the Project Hollywood days. And so, you know, when I was full on Asian Playboy, the pickup artist, going
I
hard.
saw a video. There was like a promotional video for some kind of summit in, I don't think it was Project Hollywood this video, but it was like after Project Hollywood happened and it was like a nearby mansion or probably the same one. I don't know. I wasn't there. And I don't know. There was also Adam,
Yeah, there used to be back
I
in like
forget
all
his
those
name.
kind of
Adam
POA
Lyons
conventions. Yeah,
was
there's all
also in
those
that video.
conventions. But going back to what I was saying, being a hardcore pickup artist, I just basically go 110% every weekend, 120%. And people don't realize this, but there is sort of a life cycle to most coaches and how they deal with it and how they get out of it and what they become is going to be dependent upon how they manage themselves. So obviously for a very long time, I became famous, did a lot of TV, universities, and I kind of got like super arrogant about it, right? I just got, very entitled about it. It's only until the girl I was dating, I mentioned the London model that I'd met when I cold approached when she was 19. I didn't know at the time. We dated for 8 years, and I remember we were having dinner, and I was just acting so stuck up, right? And she called me out on it, right? And I needed that because I felt like, oh yeah, like don't you know who I am? Like a fucking like Hollywood douchebag, right? And then
Mm.
over time, I realized that my success was really dependent upon like my audience, my fans, my clients, right? I'd be nothing without them. And it takes a while to get there. Like you have to maybe go through a burnout period and sort of like reevaluate where you are. And unfortunately, that sort of self-reflection and emotional awareness is not something that is through the industry. You've got a lot of bad actors. You got a lot of people who have committed or been accused of crimes, or cheat their customers, right? Don't give out refunds and just penny pinch because they operate from a frame of scarcity where they have to cheat their customers and take their money. And if you're going to treat your customer like that, how are you treating women? How are you treating yourself? How are you treating your friends and family? And so I made a conscious decision to try to live a much more ethical lifestyle and hold myself accountable. And that doesn't mean that there aren't bad actors. Like I've been stolen from. I'm not going to go into details, but I've had bad actors um, take advantage of me, and and that's fine in such that I accept my responsibility in that part, right? They have to live with who they are. I'm completely fine with that, right? Trusted the wrong person. Okay, it sucks, but I move on. And so I think that being ethical is reflected in the way I treat my clients. And I think that helps in getting more word of mouth because I barely do any advertising or anything like that. It is literally just people telling other people about what we do, what I do. And it helps that the very beginning of my origin story, at least as a professional, was a Chinese Canadian mother calling me up to help out her son who had been harassed by neo-Nazis. And so I told him, man, for 3 days and 3 nights, I'm going to be the big brother he never had. So the travel is fun, money's fun, the women is fun, but I truly believe for me, it's a mission. It's a call to service that you don't see a lot of other professionals in our industry have. For them, it's just like the instant gratification of money and girls. Here is like, yeah, that's all fun too, but I have something of a higher calling, at least in my humble opinion. Um, so how it's like as a coach, like look at your longevity, right? How are you going to last as long? Because if you burn yourself from both ends of the candle, if you cheat your clients, then you're not going to last long. You're going to get a bad reputation, right? So yeah, that's a very long answer to that.
No, I love it. We can keep going down this rabbit hole. It's pretty interesting. Um, yeah, I was thinking, do you have any recent epiphanies? You've been in this for 20 years. Maybe how about epiphanies over the years? So maybe if there was one every 5 years, for example, if you could timeline some of the biggest epiphanies you had over the years, what are some of those?
Uh, there are quite a few, right? I think starting out, I obviously started off with the mystery method, which is great. Like the ability to see it happen, to see Eric actually approach girls get interested in him doing the magic tricks and them just like fucking lighting up. And I realized like, holy shit, like this can work. That was great. But there was a certain limitation in so much as in 6 months' time, I'd learned to approach. It was great. We learned to make girls laugh. I was like so good at cocky funny. It was like a tickle me Elmo doll. Like it was like laugh, 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 bitch, laugh. Like it was so easy. I could do that. But I wasn't sexualizing. I think in the time span of like 6 months of doing indirect, the most I ever got, action out of a girl was like a hand job, right? Like, you know, but looking back, I was able to look at my field reports because I had like an Excel spreadsheet, like over 100 pages, right? And that's, something that everybody should do, some sort of journalizing in order to examine your journey,
Mhm.
where your mistakes are, what you're doing right. So I looked at mine and I realized, okay, I can do all of that, but I'm not sexualizing. And so that's when I started on the direct journey, right? Another 6 months. And then fucking finally, I got laid, right? I remember going to Hollywood and I was with my buddy Ryan, who was like a backup dancer for like Britney Spears or something like that. And I'd made it out with these two girls. One was like a tall blonde, big boobs, and one was like the shorter brunette. They ended up being like roommates, right? I didn't know this. But I was obviously more interested in the blonde. But it was like 2 a.m. and Ryan had been off doing his own thing, talking to girls. So it was too late for him to wing me. So we're like walking out. The girls are behind me. Ryan comes up to me and is like, "Oh, what do you want to do?" I'm like, "Fucking yeah." I'd parked my car at his place. It's like a really long drive. It's too late to wing me. I was like, "All right, Ryan, just run to your car." I was like, "What? Just run to your car." So he starts running. The girls see this and they walk up. He's like, "What just happened?" It's like, "Damn, my buddy just left my ass. Could you drive me home?" So I end up like going to their place and end up sleeping with the blonde. But that's what the evolution from indirect to direct style, right? The ability to see that was a big epiphany. But it was very still vital to have the foundational building blocks of the techniques that indirect had. But then I was practicing the more dominant, more sexual style of direct. And then another big epiphany was when I went to like Europe. I went with like three white buddies. After about, a year practicing game, we'd all taken mysteries boot camp. And I got laid my first night, right? And my buddies, they got laid too, but like it was like normal, right? It wasn't like any different from America. But I got laid my first night, and I just kept getting laid by European girls to the point where we were just supposed to be there for a month. I decided to stay for 2 extra weeks by myself. I was like in Scandinavia, sleeping with like the Scandinavian blonde women. And what I realized is like Europe is much more of a class-based society. What class are you? Blue collar, white collar, old money, new money, while America is much more of a race-based society. And so it's sort of like the saying by Bruce Lee, he doesn't fear the man that knows 10,000 kicks. He fears the man that has practiced one kick 10,000 times. Like I was better technique wise than all my buddies because I practiced more. I was going out 4 to 6 nights a week, just practicing. But I always lagged behind my buddies. And they were all good looking white guys, right? And we all started mystery like roughly the same, like within 1 month of each other, but they were being more successful. But what I realized in Europe was despite me practicing more, the mental parts, like I always had doubts inside the back of my head. So even if I had the same exact pickup line as another dude, I always doubted. So I was never as effective. Put me in this environment where girls weren't using race against me. All of a sudden, I was a fucking master. It's like Kal-El, Under the red sun, I have no superpowers, but under the yellow sun, I got superpowers now, right? And I was able to take that back with me to America, and I no longer have that racial limiting beliefs that so many Asian guys, not all Asian guys, but a lot of Asian guys have about race, about not being desirable or, to white, black, or Latin women, right? Intellectually, I understand it, but like in interpersonal interplay with a girl, never really occurs to me. So that's also why one of our biggest programs is our Euro Tour. I call it the number one inner game experiential event for Asian men because not only are we spending 2 weeks in Europe where they can hook up with like the tall blonde European woman, but we're doing like inner game workshops every day that are incredibly intense. It's almost like therapy designed to completely reconstruct how you think to a more evolved 2.0. And it's very intense. Like guys end up crying in a good way, but it's the inner game part that was able to catapult me to an all new level, right? 6 months indirect, 6 months of direct. I was a competent dater. But once I was able to get rid of my limiting beliefs, that's when I became, guru level, if you will.
That's normally in Poland. You do those in-game ones.
Yeah, well, like I said, when I started out, I went to London. That's where one of the times I met my, girlfriend, like, who was the model. So I've done all of Western Europe, I've done Central Europe, done Eastern Europe. But yeah, currently the Euro tour is based out more in like Central and Eastern Europe, simply because trying to do those programs in London, which it's the price is so incredibly expensive. So, money goes a little bit further, like Airbnb, you can get for 2 weeks something for like $50 a night and not spend like thousands of dollars.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, 100%. No, no, no. The inner game stuff is I'm into inner game, but I never understood like the emotional trauma thing. Maybe I'm lucky, I don't know. But I remember going to one of RSD's last events, and I was actually helping host it, and they were doing this trauma thing. It's basically they just say lay down on the floor, close your eyes, imagine the ceiling falls down and you die. I'm like, I don't know what was after that, but there were people screaming. I was like, what the fuck? It seemed pretty crazy to me, but how useful is that kind of stuff? I just thought it was a
Well,
bit too
again,
much.
this is where nuance and context matter, right? Depending upon the experience and the goal set of the student, um, inner game becomes less or more important. Yeah, I always use a sort of like an analogy, metaphor, if you will, of if you want to drive from Los Angeles to New York, you need a GPS. Like you can't do that by memory. Same thing with your lifestyle. If you're a 43-year-old virgin and you want to, fuck 100 women, like you need like inner game. You need to have a very intricate understanding of what makes you emotionally tick. Because part of why you are someone that is still a 40-year-old virgin is because there's something wrong with your inner game. You have to fix that. You have to fix your lifestyle. And it's far too easy for you to fall off that path because you're avoiding pain. So you're always, using inner game as your North Star, right? Now, if you're already pretty decent with girls and you just want to become like really good with girls, it doesn't really matter that much, right? So it's more predicated on like what foundational skills that you have and how big of a lifestyle change, is needed. Um, as to like how effective inner game is, like I don't really know like other people's teaching method. But the way I like to think of it is, this is sort of like a form of dialectical behavioral like therapy, if you will. Instead of doing like talk therapy where all you do is vent and talk, here you're learning applied skills, right? And immersing yourself into whatever stimuli that gets you anxious or nervous or fearful, exposing yourself to the point where it is no longer that, and taking the action that disproves like whatever you're afraid of. So it can be very effective depending upon the person. Like some people don't need it. Other people like they legitimately like need it. So you might be lucky enough where it's not that important to you, but other people it's very important. It just depends on the person.
It's interesting because are you in a relationship now? Because when a lot of other dating coaches, some dating coaches, we were talking about this perhaps 15 minutes ago, they just move on from the community and they go into inner game stuff and they don't go back
They
into the
become a monk.
seduction. They become a monk mode. And one famous example, and everyone misses this guy. Julien Blanc had a disaster in 2014 with what do you call it, a scandal, and apologized on TV and everything. What's he doing these days? Well, for the last however many years now, he got married, moved on, doesn't do seduction stuff anymore. But in his time, you remember 10 years ago, He was number one in the entire universe for pickup artist advice for, I don't know, infield maybe. Everyone was really loving Julian Blanc and the stuff he was doing. And there were some robber guys out there who kind of disappeared from the scene for one reason or another. Um, Aside from the stuff discussed, is there other aspects to why you're still in the game? Are you going to get married someday? What's on the menu for JT?
Well, I mean, I'm the only dating coach that's ever presided over his own student's wedding. I think that will, well, we say never, that'll probably be the closest for me to getting married. I've been in several long-term relationships. Probably the longest was like 8 years. Um, and others where maybe I considered it, but I myself do not gravitate towards the institution of marriage. I'm not saying that other guys that are watching this or my clients shouldn't. Like, by all means, I'm there to support you if that's what you want. But I myself, it's not something I desire for myself. Again, never say never. Who knows? But I'm not looking for it.
Just gonna stay young forever. You're in your 40s and you still look like you're 25. It's getting crazy.
Just got to
I'm
do the
gonna look
Korean
like an
skincare,
old
man.
man super fast. I'm already getting there.
It's
Um,
the Asian fountain of youth, man.
yeah.